morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget. We're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
It's good to know you could join us on Early Exchange today. I am Blessing Aiche. Now, this is the show that wraps up all of this for the weekend. So we're doing a recap of some stories that make global headlines. Some of them, you've heard us talk about them here on Early Exchange in the course of the week, but most of them you have not at all. And so it's a time to take a deeper look into global and, of course, regional happenings today as we wrap up the show for the week. Femi Ayodele is ready and set to help you start your day as you wrap up the week too. So it can be on a positive note and you can pack with you plenty of gains and say, in this week, this is what I've been able to achieve. Femi.
Yes, I'm ready and my morale is high, just like yours. How are you today?
I'm well. And
TGIF, thank God.
Yes, thank God it's Friday.
The weekend is loading.
It's loading, yes, but before you get onto the Owambe, you should be able to draw a table of the wins of the week and say, yes, if it's information you've gotten, that means you're set for the next week to use those information to good.
Don't worry, I have a list of the Owambe happening this weekend. So I'll
share the IVs. Share the IVs. Share the IVs.
All right, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange this morning. It's a beautiful day, another opportunity for us to look at global issues, to discuss issues related to the economy. Yesterday we talked about the dollarization of the Nigerian economy, but today our conversation is going to look at the dollarization of the Iraqi's economy. Yes, you heard me. Why do we have to talk about what is happening in Iraq? You know, it's a global issue, and if anything is in the news, it's our responsibility to talk about it. Don't forget you can be part of this conversation. All you just have to do is to join us on our social media platform on our YouTube page. We're also going to talk about the Grammy, the Grammys, the Grammy Award that took place recently, and a lot of expectations about Nigerian artists that will happen. So we're going to have your reactions as well. But let's set the ball rolling with news update. And Juvie is standing by in the newsroom to take us around the world.
Hello and welcome to News Update. I am Juvie Ofiene. The Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, Mele Kyari, and the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Olayemi Cardoso, have met to review the decision of the oil company to domicile a significant portion of its revenue and banking services with the Apex Bank. They acknowledge the mutual benefit of this arrangement, particularly in enhancing NNPCL's management of its cash holdings and limits in commercial bank as set by the Board of Directors. In a joint statement by the NNPCL Chief Corporate Communications Officer, Olufemi Shoneye, and CBN's Acting Director of Corporate Communications Department, Hakama Sidi Ali, it was revealed that the bank has provided improved digital platforms and established specific limits to manage NNPCL transactions. Both parties pledged to strengthen their collaboration further to ensure the smooth operations of NNPCL Limited, while affirming that the company will maintain banking transactions with commercial banks as necessary. Away from Nigeria, Liberia's President Joseph Boakai, who defeated his predecessor, George Weah, in November 2023 elections, has initiated an anti-corruption drive by commissioning an audit of 3 crucial government institutions, including the central bank, as announced by the presidency on Thursday. This move aligns with the government's campaign promise to combat corruption and enhance living standards in Liberia. The audit, to be conducted by Liberia's General Auditing Commission, will cover the period from 2018 to 2023, focusing on the central bank, the National Security Agency, and the Executive Protection Service, with findings expected within 3 months. This action signifies the commencement of an audit of government ministries and agencies, reflecting a commitment to transparency and fighting mismanagement of government funds. ExxonMobil Coal has announced its decision to leave Equatorial Guinea in the second quarter of this year, transferring its remaining investment in the country to local government. This move, according to reports, comes in line with the company's long-term strategy following a previous report in 2022 indicating its intention to leave the country upon the expiration of its licenses as part of a broader phase-out from legacy crude assets across Africa. Exxon emphasized its commitment to a safe transition of operations and ensuring the welfare of those affected by this change. The company's oil output in Equatorial Guinea has seen a decline over the years, with efforts to sell its key asset, the Zarifo operation, dating back to 2020. And away from Africa, Germany is set to receive its first shipment of pipeline natural gas from Algeria under a medium-term contract signed between a subsidiary of trader VNG AG and the state-owned oil and gas firm Sonatrach. This agreement, which was announced by the company yesterday, will help to strengthen energy business partnership with Europe. VNG becomes the first German company to procure pipeline gas from Algeria, and the deal with Leipzig-based VNG Handel and Vertree GmbH did not disclose specifics regarding the contract's duration or value. This development comes as Germany seeks alternative supplies following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, which eroded its long-term standing reliance on Russian gas. Algeria's substantial gas production, totaling 106 billion cubic meters per year according to Sonatrach figures, underscores the significance of this partnership. And lastly, the U.S. Senate committee has voted on legislation to bolster safety inspector and air traffic controller staffing while rejecting raising the airline's pilot retirement age to 67. This decision followed the House vote to increase retirement age. The Senate bill, with a $107 billion budget over 5 years, includes provision for additional flights from Reagan Washington National Airport and consumer-friendly measures like prohibiting airlines from separating families on flights. It aims to enhance airline safety by increasing civil penalties for consumer violations and addressing the shortage of air traffic controllers. Despite not adopting all consumer rules sought by the Biden administration, the bill aims to foster innovation in aviation technology, according to Senator Ted Cruz, the committee's ranking Republican. And that's all there is for now. Early exchange continues in a bit. I am Juvi Ufiene.
All right, thank you, Juby, for giving us a nice ride with a news update. Now it's time for us to shape policy and advance development with that conversation. We're going to start from Iraq. Well, you may be wondering why we're starting from there. The news is the Iraqi central bank has decided to ban, dollars transactions, for domestic transaction in that country, and the implication of that is for some banks to sit up and also to avoid the issue of money laundering and excessive use of U.S. currency. What will be the implication of this? We have our in-house analyst. Let's see what he will have to say about this development or the latest development in Iraq. We're being joined by Sam Huruwije. Glad you have joined us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. My pleasure to be here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blessing. My pleasure.
Yesterday we talked about the dollarization of the Nigerian economy, and now today we are starting our conversation from Iraq, where the Iraqi central bank has decided to bar commercial banks from foreign transactions, to avoid the excessive use of the U.S. currency. How do you react to this? Then give us a background to this kind of development.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think it's a complete ban on the dollar. The U.S. Undersecretary under the Treasury Department, Brian Nelson, visited Iraq between 28th and 30th of January, and there were issues that were raised in terms of terrorism financing, and about 8 banks were listed out. So the idea of this banning of dollar usage in Iraq is not essentially for the entire domestic economy, but they're actually targeting Iran, particularly from terrorism financing. So it's an intelligence decision from the U.S. based on the relationship between the U.S. And Iraq. So it's not the entire ban, just about 8 banks that the financial intelligence surveillance has captured with a view to be able to uphold the sanction against Iran. So it's not really targeting the Iraqis per se. On the other hand, the same Iraqi government sometime in July last year banned about 14 banks. So with this current regime, so you have about 20-something banks within the radar of the U.S. Financial Intelligence Unit. So, but we must put it in perspective that it's not essentially about the domestic economy of Iraq, but that they are targeting about a specific bank that they think has a link to smuggling of dollar to Iran. And you know the relationship between Iran and the U.S. Since 1958 has not been very friendly. That is not within the purview of this discussion, but we need to underscore the reason so that people don't just say that dollar has been banned in Iraq. Though Iraq has some relationship with U.S. after the last issues they had with the death of their leader.
All right, this alliance between the U.S. now and Iraq in this aspect, do you see it creating some relationship trouble between Iraq and Iran, considering the role that Iraq played in the coming to be of the current government of Iraq?
I'm not too sure about that. Their relationship may not necessarily be so influenced by this decision, because if you look at the entire banking sector and the financial system within Iraq, if you're just taking a radar on about 8 banks, I don't think that will affect their relationship, in my view.
All right, let's look at this effort being made, to tackle financial terrorism. The idea is, if these banks, the 8 banks in questions, have been barred from this kind of transaction, it's going to reduce, the abuse of this currency. Do you see this? How do you see this playing out, and the effect of these on the economy and the use of FX in that kind of country?
I think the news item and what decision that has been made, that 8 banks, is just a fragment of the financial service sector. The restriction is only on dollars. So maybe those 8 banks identified that have been banned to trade on dollars may have some negative impact in the overall business outlook within the Iraqi economy, but I don't think that has a significant impact on the business within that domestic economy.
Now, why is dollar the target? Because those banks that have been banned now from making dollar transaction, they didn't stop them from making transaction in other currencies. It was just dollar. So for the countries that have been accused of dollar smuggling, or areas where the U.S. feels there is dollar smuggling, why is the attention so much on the dollar? Now, if you're being restricted access to dollars, will it in any way affect what they do with it? Can they make that shift towards another currency?
No, I think the point is essentially about economic intelligence surveillance. So the point here is that there's a sanction, an ongoing sanction against Iran. And the dollar is one of the major sanctions that is placed. So the suspicion, or the American government or the U.S. Treasury Department has a feeling that if these banks, based on their intelligence, have some good relationship with illicit transfer of funds, particularly money laundering and smuggling of dollar across the border to Iran, they have a feeling that if you put a stop in terms of transaction, in terms of dollar, within these 8 banks, then there's a great understanding that will reduce. But again, when you talk about illicit transaction, ban essentially does not have so much importance, because across the globe, you have a lot of illicit financial transactions that even cannot be traced.
Let me rephrase. What role does the dollar, or in what way does dollar aid illicit transactions, whether for terrorism or for other unofficial purposes? Because if they're banning access to dollar or try to restrict access to dollar, it must be that maybe it's aiding certain kinds of transaction. What role does it play? How does it facilitate?
No, simply put, essentially, international trade is dominated in dollars. So, and all transactions are essentially done in dollars. So, if you are going to smuggle arms, you're going to do some kinds of transfers, they are done with dollars. So that's essentially is an instrument of international trade. So that's the reason why they're trying to place a ban on that. But how significant that is a different subject matter.
All right, interesting. Let's expand this discussion so that our audience will understand better. Let's look at all the parties involved. You have the US, you have Iraq, and then you're talking about the interest of Iran now. Now, when it comes to international relations, you have the political side of it, and you always have interest. So paint to us a picture of the interest of these parties that are involved. You have the US on the other side, you have Iraq, and then you have Iran.
Okay, there's a high level of mutual suspicion between the US and Iran, and earlier I mentioned that their relationship since 1958 has not been very, very cordial. There's been a mutual suspicion in terms of Iran financing terrorism, particularly in the Middle East. On the other hand, some 3 U.S. soldiers were killed recently, and the suspicion is that they've been murdered by Iran on the other hand. So if you look at it from the politics and international relation, or international politics on the other hand, there's always a growing tension. Even America's relationship with Iraq is a different subject matter entirely. But within that conclave in the Middle East, particularly Iraq and Iran, this suspicion will continue to be there. So like in international politics, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemy, but permanent interest. So I think the U.S. is pursuing its own interest in Iraq to undermine the growing influence of Iran within that. And there's even a link that some of the things that happen in Palestine and Israel can be traced to some financing from Iran. So that is the tension within the international system among those 3 countries under review.
So what is the interest for Iraq at this point coming to cooperation with the US? Because this they're doing, they could afford it to have said, no, they're not banning the banks because it doesn't have direct implication on their economy. But it's the US passing through Iraq to do what they want done in Iran. So why do you think Iraq is cooperating?
Iraq's interest, particularly with oil and gas, have a lot of relationship with the US in terms of export of their oil commodity. Even in terms of their central bank holding in terms of dollar, they have over 100 billion of US dollars domiciled within the central bank of Iraq. So there's a mutual relationship that is essentially about the exports of oil and gas, and that relationship exists with them. So that is the core interest.
On the other hand, do you see it having a better impact on the local currency of Iraq, which is Iraq dinar? Do you think this kind of development now, because for every bad development, you can also have, on the other hand, the good coming out of the bad. Do you see it having a good impact on the use of the local currencies in Iraq?
Yes, in one breath, since there's a sustenance of a business relationship for export and the inflow of dollar into that domestic economy, I think in that respect, then it will impact on the citizens.
So what kind of sanity do you think this will bring to the financial institution in Iraq?
Well, this is based on some level of suspicion based on the US intelligence. So we cannot really put on the table that these banks that are suspended actually has been caught in the web, but then that's the international politics aspect of it. But to what extent it will sanitize smuggling of dollar, illicit transaction, terrorism financing, and all that, that again remains to be seen, maybe from the perspective of the US foreign policy in the Middle East.
Now, looking at the effort to tackle the issue of terrorism or financial terrorism, from the example or the reference that we have now, which is that of Iraq, what should be the lessons for other nations looking at the disposition to this issue of terrorism, the proactiveness, if I may put it that way, in issuing this kind of ban? So what should be the example for other nations looking at this reference point?
If we take it from Nigeria, there were some reports some years ago that certain people were financing terrorism from Dubai, and some reports were released, and as we speak, nothing has been done. So the lesson is that once the economic and financial intelligence surveillance units across the globe are able to pick certain information, then the country should do the needful in terms of imposing sanctions or bringing those people to book based on those reports. So the lesson is that we should take information from the financial intelligence units across the globe so that we can sanitize smuggling and terrorism.
Okay, now that you mentioned Nigeria, Nigeria battles with the dollarization of the economy. Now, an outright ban on some banks making dollar transaction may not be the way to go, but in that aspect, what do you think can also be done as regards curbing dollarization of the Nigerian economy?
The central bank has a prerogative to manage the financial service sector. So I think their banking supervision, in my view, somewhat is weak. So the central bank needs to find a way to manage the assets of this bank in terms of how they trade on dollar. Then two, as a people, we must look inward to consume what we produce locally so that the impact on the foreign exchange is reduced to some extent. So the central bank on one hand has the big stick to control what is done within the commercial banking sector. Then as citizens, we must look inward, we must be disciplined and see how we can consume our own product rather than the over-dependence on imports.
Now, talking about over-dependence on import, because we are relating it with Nigeria, what will be the starting point? Are you advocating for a kind of massive reorientation, and how is that going to happen? Because over the years, people are used to foreign products, maybe due to the standard, and then the fact that you don't have local substitutes sometimes when it comes to the standard. What's your take on that?
I think the issue of standards, to some extent, is a bit of international propaganda. I think we need to drop that template, in my view. But then the government, on the other hand, must find a way to be disciplined in terms of consumptions of locally made products. When you have state banquets, the products that should be served should be local products. Then we should find a way to patronize local manufacturing companies in terms of if government want to purchase car. There should be a policy. There was a time in this country in the 70s where Peugeot Automobile was the minimum benchmark for the public service. So that's the minimum. You must purchase cars to sustain that industry. So if we're able to come into quick speed with some of those policy regime that we had in the past, and we're able to sustain them under the current regime, then that might improve on what we're canvassing here.
Let me put this. According to this report, there are some hierarchies who have this impression that this decision is also being influenced by the U.S. That in fact they said specifically that this instruction was given from Washington and then looking at the interest of the U.S. Now, what do you make of the sentiment that the interference of U.S. in the affairs of a country like Iraq? There are some who share the sentiment, and somehow you can't wish away this kind of prejudice.
Is it in Nigeria or
no, in Iraq?
In Iraq?
Yeah, we're still talking about the story.
Yes, essentially, if a U.S. Undersecretary within the Treasury Department just visited some few weeks ago, and that decision was made, essentially, is America's influence in the domestic affair of Iraq, and is essentially based on the trading relationship. Oil and gas, that's the main thing. So they have a greater trade of consumption of oil and gas from Iraq.
And you don't see that as a form of interference, as some have shared that feeling?
Since there's a trading relationship and there's an economic tie between both parties in terms of trade, then what can we say about that?
Do you foresee a sort of retaliation from Iran to Iraq and even the U.S.?
Though I'm not competent to speak on that, but if my thinking serves me very right, I don't really think so, because there's some kind of relationship between Iraq and Iran within the Islamic states. So I can't say that for sure.
Okay, we'll go on a quick break and return to continue the conversation talking about the ban on some banks in Iraq making dollar transaction after this break. Stay tuned.
My name is Dr. Ajili Tobi. My name is Etemere Glover. Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
The National Theatre, Igomu, built during the military regime of Olusegun Obasanjo and finished in the time for the Second World Festival of Black Arts and Culture, FESTAC, in 1977. The theater holds amazing treasures and memories. The artworks fill everyone with pride. The National Arts Theatre is visible from the motorway which connects Lagos Island and the mainland. The National Theatre is packed with the artworks of legendary contemporary Nigerian artists, stained glass walls by Yusuf Grillo, sculptures and murals by Lamidi Fakeye, Erabo Emopai, and many others. It was put to full use for a month as one of the 4 venues of the second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture, tagged Festac 77. The complex hosted 16,000 participants from 56 African countries and the diaspora in an unprecedented showcase of African music, fine art, literature, drama, dance, and religion. The National Art Theatre was built and designed by Techno Experts Troll, a Bulgarian company mirroring the Palace of Culture and Sports in Varna, Bulgaria. Completed in 1976, the building is one of the largest and most beautiful of its kind on the African continent. It consists of a central hall with 5,000 seats, a collapsible stage that can be quickly rebuilt, a conference hall with 1,600 seats, 2 large exhibition halls, and 2 cinemas with 800 seats each. The theater complex has a dressing room for artists, a garage, offices, coffee bars, and a buffet. It has indoor TV and radio systems, as well as booths with facilities for simultaneous translation of languages and hectares of lush green lawn around. The majestic structure sits in Igomu like a quiet mountain, mesmerizing visitors and passers-by. The National Theatre, Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, indeed, we're still shaping policy and advancing development. With that conversation, we're still looking at the efforts being made by the Iraqi Central Bank to curb the issue of financial terrorism in that country. And Sam Oruoje has been giving us his own beat, talking about his impression about the development in that country, and he's still here with us. Sam, glad to know you're still here with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Now, looking at this commercial banks that have been barred from this kind of illicit transaction, don't you think efforts should be made to look at individuals behind it? Because in some instances, if you don't go after the big guns, you might not get this thing managed, and it's a matter of time. They will still get back to business. Don't you think they need to take it further to look at the big names, the big brands, and if possible, individuals behind this kind of illicit development? Yeah,
there are certain information that will not be in the public domain. Beyond the 8 banks that has been removed from dollar transaction within Iraq, there are other things that cannot be signposted within the purview of the public. So if there are financial intelligence audits that implicate some people on the trade, then that again will not be in the public domain. I'm sure they will do their due diligence, and whatever further sanction or pronouncement that will be made by the government will not be immediately known to the public. So I think that's the way we can respond to that at the moment.
All right, talking about illicit financial inflows, it's something that many countries battle with, and they try to use the financial system to curb it. But what do you think are the reasons or why it seemed like it's a challenge that is very hard to handle?
All right. You know, there's a two sides to a coin. Just like you have normal financial transactions, you equally have counterfeit transactions. And the financial system is so fluid, particularly when you talk about wire transfer, that's moving money from one jurisdiction to the other. So therefore, because they are not really over-the-counter transaction where people come and do paper documentation, which is easy to track. Some of these things, even though they have a paper trail in some cases, then you have people that do some of those things, and they are called opaque transactions. It has to do with drugs and other illicit gun smuggling and all that. So as long as you have the traditional flow of financial services, then the illicit aspect of those flows will continue to exist as there's a human element in those transactions. But what the government can do is that with improvement of technology and machine tools, I'm sure that some of these transactions will be tracked from time to time, and maybe you're able to bring to book some of those people that are involved in illicit trades and transactions. So it's a very, very difficult challenge across the globe, even though you have interagency collaborations between countries, but then you see have that major challenge. Even in West Africa, you see a lot of inflow of small and medium arms coming into Nigeria, but then over the years, even where we have financial service intelligence, we've not been able to track down the inflow. So, but I think technology will help to reduce that.
What should be of concern to African nations here? Because you might say, okay, this is happening in Iraq, but when you look at the dimension of, terrorism, it has no boundary. Now, for Africans, you somehow play a sensitive role in the continent. What should be of concern if something like this is happening in Iraq to African nations?
Well, until the U.S., who is, in this case, has gone to Iraq to see 8 banks from their radar, these be suspicious in terms of smuggling money between Iraq and Iran. So if any financial intelligence report or surveillance traces some funds in terms of smuggling of dollar into Africa to finance terrorism, once those facts are there, I'm sure that the respective governments will take responsibility for such actions.
But does it have to be U.S. sounding the alarm? Do countries need to wait for the U.S. to sound the alarm?
No, not necessarily the U.S. Once you have some information through surveillance, then those people are able to raise the alarm. So, by the way, because we're talking about U.S. in this particular case, that's why I use the U.S. as a case study. But then, any country that can pick information, and we mentioned in this conversation that there were some reports about some people financing terrorism in Nigeria from the Dubai government. So that alarm was raised based on their own financial surveillance and intelligence. And that information was shared with the Nigerian government. Whatever they do with that information becomes the responsibility and the leadership of that particular country.
Now, I asked that question because you mentioned that the U.S. had not received intelligence about Nigerian banks or African banks doing having such issues as the one pointed out in Iraq. So they can, ahead of time, be proactive.
Yeah, I'm not saying specific term, but I'm answering the question based on the central subject of discussion. So I don't want to get, so I'm saying America, in this case, in Iraq, has this intelligence report, and we're saying you're asking for Africa, whether they are proactive or not. It's when you pick information or intelligence that you'll be able to inform those countries. These are the intelligence we have in terms of illicit transaction, particularly on terrorism. This what we want this specific country to do to forestall those illicit transactions like smuggling of dollars.
Let's look at the issue of money laundering, which is part of the reasons highlighted in the story for this kind of development. Now, in spite, you know, the regulation, in spite the education, in spite several efforts being made to curb this development, you observe that people still engage in money laundering. Could it be greed, or what could be fueling this kind of practice, in spite of the regulations and the general education about it?
Yeah, when there's corruption, people always find a way to put their loot somewhere. So they look for all kinds of illicit transaction to create a safe haven for their money. So that is a difficult call to make. Why government and civil society organizations are trying to see how you can reduce money laundering. Some people will constantly find a way to take their corruption proceeds somewhere through all kinds of illicit form, so that the money can be moved either offshore or onshore, depending on which side of the divide that transaction is coming. So the counsel here, or the advice here, is that government should firm up their regulatory framework in terms of anti-money laundering. Then officers that are saddled with the responsibility of doing financial intelligence should be up and doing, so that they can track down more illicit funds. So those funds can be returned to their country of origin and to the benefit of the people.
All right, let's move away from the Iraqi situation to the collaboration between Nigeria and Germany in establishing a migrant resource center in Abuja. Lots of people want to travel, or as we see in Nigeria, Jakba. And over time, the dangerous routes that some of them use have been discouraged, but you still find people wanting to go through other routes just to get to Europe. And this time around, the German authorities and Nigeria are coming together to have a resource center where people who intend to travel are educated on how best to do it, giving them information on how to secure jobs ahead. Do you think this is an encouragement to people leaving Nigeria?
It's an encouragement. The German Development Corporation, in partnership with the Ministry of Labor and Productivity, put a center in one small village on the outskirts of Abuja. It's actually on Nasarawa, yes, precisely, but they use the term Abuja because of the contiguous nature of that small town. Yes, that center was developed by the German Development Corporation in partnership with the Ministry of Labor and Productivity. Essentially, is to see how they can train some Nigerians in some specific skill set that will be useful to the German government if they choose to migrate. On the other hand, is equally providing information on legal migration pathway. That's you have about 6 dominant legal migration pathway to Europe, and Germany is one of those. So that center will find a way to educate people on the legal pathways rather than using the irregular ways. So essentially, that center is to help safe and regular migration so that people have sufficient information. So if you are traveling to Germany, you have a visa that can support you for occasional or seasonal work permit. You have the one for study, you have the one for research, you have the one for family unification. So those centers will give you a deeper understanding of how you can migrate legally. Then on the other hand, train certain people in some of the skill sets that they lack so that people can migrate using the legal way. So I think it's a welcome development, and I think such collaboration should expand beyond the one that they just do in Abuja. If we can have about those centers in about the 6 geopolitical zone, that will help to stop the tide of irregular migration, focusing on safe and regular migration, which is a win-win situation for both countries.
Now, the MRS is expected to be like an advisory center. Now, what kind of programs, activities do you think should be put in place to ensure that the essence of having this center is justified, and then Nigeria can maximize having a center like this to the advantage of Nigerians, especially reducing the pressure of migration?
I think it's just a migration hub where both the sending country, which is Nigeria, and the receiving country, which is Germany, have basic information, and I spoke to those earlier, talking about the legal migration pathway, which is being sponsored by the European Union, where you have about 6 elements, and most Nigerians are not even of the knowledge of this regular migration pathway. So that center is a place you go to, then you have the right information. You share information. Then 2, there are skill set training within those centers where people can learn basic skills. So in terms of supporting regular migration is beneficial to Nigeria in particular. That will reduce people using the illegitimate way or irregular ways to get out of the country. And over the years, the German Development Corporation will have trained over 30-something thousand persons, Nigerians. So this center will help to scale up some of the activities of the German Development Corporation in Nigeria in conjunction with the Ministry of Labor and Productivity. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, is a win-win scenario for both countries to forge that development cooperation that exists between Germany and Nigeria.
Now, why do you think Germany is having this collaboration with Nigeria? You mentioned they've already been at it before. So why not other countries in Europe? What is the gain for Germany here?
No, I
what
think this
would be the gain?
Okay, I think this particular one is because the center was just opened recently. There are a lot of development cooperation across board, particularly the European Union. They have a very big investment when you talk about international migration from Nigeria. So this is in the news because a new center has been opened. There are other centers that are sponsored. There's one in Ikoyi, Migration Development Center too, that has some partnership with the German Development Corporation and the government of Germany and Nigeria and the Ministry of Labor and Productivity just after the passport office in Ikoyi. Same kind of center, same kind of scenario. So this is just new. So the European Union is focusing on the fact that they want people to be here. And those who need to come there must have some skill set, and they have the reason to be there. So this development cooperation that exists to strengthen relationship between the two countries.
How optimistic are you that this center will help, reduce the issue of traveling through illegal routes? Because people who do this, they are just bent on traveling through those routes, in spite the regulation, in spite the surveillance, even in spite of the fact that they understand the hazards involved. So how optimistic are you that this will further help to reduce this? And what can be done differently using the center to canvass for this kind of narrative?
I think one of the major challenges in international migration is lack of information. So I think the center will help essentially to improve on the migration of Nigerians to Germany in particular. But when you talk about human smuggling and people using irregular routes, most times it's even their relations that put them into those kind of difficult journeys. But once you have adequate information, like there's an existing campaign by the European Union to support with a big budget, I don't want to mention that so that it doesn't look as if I'm advertising the European Union, to see how people can come legally. And you have various means by which people can travel. So with these centers, once those information and advocacy get into the grassroots, that will reduce the number of people that travel through those difficult and dangerous routes.
On the other side, there are people who succeeded in using those dangerous routes rather to get to Europe. But on arriving there, they could not really integrate into the society because they had no proper documentation. So this center is also to serve as a means for those who want to return back to Nigeria, maybe to train them and make it easy for them to return. Do you see lots of such people taking advantage of this, returning back to Nigeria?
Oh yes, that's one of the purview of that resource center. So it's equally to find a way to get training and empowerment for returnees. Those people that couldn't get an asylum status because the ROSD claim, that's a refugee resettlement claim, other what guys could not sustain getting them into the system. So the government, on the other hand, based on the amount that is spent on them, they want to return. It's called voluntary return, done in line with the International Organization for Migration. So that, again, we have some returnees to settle quickly. And I do know between June last year and early this year, the German government has returned a lot of people, particularly to Lagos and Benin City under the IOM returnee regime. And they provide shelters and give some basic empowerment and vocational training before the people are reintegrated into the society. So that will help.
Part of the responsibilities of the center will also be to provide counseling and psychological support to returnees. Do you think this should be given enough priority, looking at the state of these returnees? And then how do we, expand this kind of service to returnees generally in the country?
In fact, one of the major things you do when people return into a new environment is to put them through a psychosocial counseling services because there's a great divide between where they are coming from and the post-traumatic stress disorder that they had gone through the irregular migration means. So that is very essential to resettle people so that they can recalibrate their mind for new challenges, the new environment, which was originally their environment, but they had gone through a lot of things. So that is a great component in terms of trying to reduce their traumatic experience. You are able to redirect their mind that is not, after all that bad. You have a life to live, then we're going to give you some incentive so that you can resettle into your own community. But on the other hand, there are people that are equally settled in a third country. What it means is that you may not get an asylum in a particular country, not necessarily your home country. Then you can be settled in Canada, you can be settled in Australia, you can be settled in New Zealand, depending on those kind of arrangements that happen within those frameworks. So it's not always about bringing people back to their country of origin. There are some people that are lucky to be settled in a third country, and that was the issue between Rwanda and the UK that has raised a lot of heat in terms of how to return certain people from the UK and settle them in Rwanda, which is like a third country, not necessarily going to their country of origin. But those are challenges in terms of migration and development.
Now, some may not be very lucky to return to a third country which they perceive to be better than where they're coming from. Some may actually return to their country. And before making such trips, some may have even disposed of whatever they had with the intention that they were going to greener pastures, and so they were able to replace those things. Coming back, they have virtually nothing to fall back on aside what is giving them the stipend given to them to resettle for a short period. So we find a situation where some also want to take that trip again with the hope that they will be more successful this time around. What can be done to help the plight of such people?
I think it's a major challenge that is there. There are experiences where people come in and once they leave the settlement center and they give them their starter pack, the next thing they are doing is to move through the same route is a major challenge. I think it needs a proper orientation, a proper education that in spite of the challenges that you have gone through, if you return, if you properly organize yourself, you can be useful to yourself again. So we need more advocacy. We need more psychosocial counseling that Femi spoke to earlier, so that we can find a way to bring the people back. But I know it's just a small fragment of some of them that I always want to go back, because maybe their worldview had changed significantly, and when they look at the milestones of some of their contemporaries and the time they have spent being away, maybe 20, 15 years, and they are coming back to meet the people that they thought they would do better because they had moved for greener pasture. Yeah, that psychological defeat become a major problem. But with constant counseling, I think people will come to reality that life is not a straight line. Sometimes you have challenges where you can pick yourself. I know people who had returned, who are doing extremely well in businesses and in the civil society community. So those people can reach out further to those people that I was through this trajectory. This is where I am. I came back 2 years ago. I took that IOM starter initiative, and this is where I am. So it's not all hope lost. They see a better future.
Now, talking about advocacy, which you made reference to, let's revisit this issue of Japa syndrome. Because if you do the survey, an average Nigerian wants to Japa, with the assumption that the other side is greener, even if there is no pasture, but there's just this assumption that it's greener. What kind of advocacy should be done to help people understand the reality they're even going to face when they get there? Because people don't know until they get there. They assume that once they get to the other side, they start picking dollars or pounds or foreign currencies, and things will start get better. But when they get there, the reality stares at them. So what kind of advocacy can be brought into these for people to even understand properly, or perhaps curb the trend, if possible?
I think essentially is sharing of information. And before you undertake migration journeys, you need to understand what kind of skill set, what kind of things are you bringing to the table on the other side. So it's not always very green on the other side. So the assumption that once you travel, and again, it depends on our mindset. When people just come because you look at the exchange value, and if I'm living elsewhere and I change my money to the local money, and people think that all is well there. So I think information, sharing of information. 2, there's nothing wrong about migration or moving from one country to the other. But then you must move with adequate information. Do you have the skill requirement to migrate to this country? Do you have adequate information of the kind of diplomatic relationship or consular relationship you have with your home country? What are you going to do in that place? Is it because people are just going, therefore you want to sell your asset? I know of people who have sold so much to get into those environments, and when they get to the other side, then there's a culture shock that they cannot even sustain themselves, and even people had to take their life in some cases. So what we need, by and large, is adequate information. Nothing wrong in migrating. What are you migrating for? What kind of migration regime that favor you, rather than trying to seek an asylum based on concocted claims, which are not tenable in terms of asylum claim on the other side.
Now, before we wrap up, what is the role of travel agents in all of this? This Migration Resource Center, do you think it should be in partnership with the travel agent? Because some of these persons are told these stories by the travel agents, giving the assurance that once you do this, do that, then it's all sorted, for them to get there and find that it's a different ball game.
That again is illicit transaction that aid some that aid irregular migration. What it is that sometimes because of the pecuniary interest of this travel agent, they want to secure an admission and give you a student visa that has a time band, and people think they have done their own business. So the resource center should equally target agents so that they get the right education, not just trying to package people. You get your agency fee, then you just push people on the other side. Once that visa regime, some people travel on tourism visa, want to go and work. It doesn't work that way. So once you arrive on the other side and the time is gone, then you have a problem. So you've been hiding from the immigration personnel. So people going to travel agent too must get the adequate information before they even consult those agencies. So the resource center should expand their scope of engagement to target some of these agents. I think that's a great question.
All right. I think we just have to leave the conversation here. We feel like expanding it further, but time is not our friend. But we just have to appreciate you, Sam, for your thought. No doubt you did justice to this. Thank you so much for your commitment.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you too for being here.
My pleasure.
All right, let's go on a short break now. When we return, we'll look at something different. And what could that be? You find out after this short break. Stay with us.
My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godio Didi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for. And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching Souq News.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Masi Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment.
Good
morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Now it's time for us to discuss something related to entertainment. You know, it's Friday. Let's just, wrap up with something light. I want to look at issues related to Grammys. Talking about the Grammy Awards. The recent one was trailed with a lot of reactions. A lot of Nigerians expected some of the Nigerian artists to, have won. But there are several things that played out. For us to understand what played out, that's why we're having this discussion, for people to understand what it takes to win the Grammys, what are the requirements. We're going to have our guest shortly to discuss this. Don't forget, you can be part of this conversation. For those of you who are not happy what transpired at the Grammys Award, this is an opportunity for you to share your view. Let your voice be heard. What do you think went wrong? Like someone said, Nigeria went, but did we conquer? Did we win? That's the question. And if you need to provide an answer, just go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page, to share your view on the last one that we had. All right, Blessing is here. There are a lot of people. Let me put the sentiment, that trailed the last award was the fact that some Nigerians were expected to have won. A good reference is Davido. But people need to understand what it takes to win the Grammys. There is this assumption that for you to win it has to depend on the number of followers, the number of fans, the number of followership, your clout, how popular you are. But it doesn't work that way. The reality is the Grammy works with a group of people who are like the academy. For you to have been voted for by the members of the academy, it means they must have, done a survey on your work. So it's not about the number of fans. Davido had, or still has, a lot of fans, huge fans. Yes, no doubt, he's a big artist. So a lot of people had expected, okay, this could be his time. But it played out the other way. But the truth is, the reality is, you have to be voted for by members of your academy who are professionals, music producers in the United States. Not just in any other way, because when it talks about the Grammy, it still has a root in the United States. That's just the origin. So this is the narrative that people need to understand. And interestingly, you have Nigerians who have won Grammys. You have Sade Adu, in the 80s. You have Burna Boy and the rest of them. But people feel it is high time you have Nigerians dominating the scene. But my opinion is the fact that you're being nominated is designed to show that your works are being recognized. It's designed to show you have the potential. And all you just have to do is to keep working. So people must understand how it works. You have to be voted by this selected few people who are members of the academy in their own judgment, in their own wisdom, looking at your art, your performance, your song, and some of the things you've done over that year. It's just a record of a year. And the fact that you don't win this year, you might win another year. So there are people who are like, I saw a particular video, a fan of Davido who got angry and then had to react overboard, started breaking things because he felt Davido should have won and then he didn't win. But people need to understand that it's not about his followership on social media. It's not the number of awards or the number of albums or how popular. We know he's popular in Africa, even globally. And interestingly, give it to Nigerian music artists, they are doing well in recent times. You look at the globalization, the issue of technology. Some of our songs now are globally accepted, unlike before where it's just localized. And the interesting thing is, there are certain narratives done by some big artists in Nigeria. I don't want to mention names, but they started this evolution. We had a conversation with one of the legends recently who talked about the evolution and the sacrifice. And so this has gone beyond Nigeria. And I'm proud to say that one of the things we take to the other world, we export is...
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you're on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News who had the courage to transcend a locked off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
Broad Street. Broad Street, situated in Lagos Island, is steeped in Nigerian history. Once the biggest financial hub of the country, it housed the headquarters of major banks, linked the CBN, the stock exchange, and the loads of lender companies. Broad Street is a historically significant street. It has played a central role in the development of Lagos and history, an important commercial and administrative center for the British colonial authorities. It was also a home to some of the city's earliest modern.
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you are on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News who had the courage to transcend a locked off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.